Welcome to the Exit Rich podcast, where the leading authority on buying, selling, fixing, and growing companies, Michelle Seiler Tucker, is dedicated to helping you find the path to retire rich and move on to your next adventure by exiting your business for the desired dream price you deserve. Get ready to exit rich with your host, Michelle Seiler Tucker.
Welcome to another episode of Exit Rich. I'm so excited to welcome Ryan Gottfredson, PhD, is a cutting-edge mindset author. Gosh, mindset. We can all use a mindset coach right now, given the last 2 years that we've been in. He's a researcher and consultant. Ryan is currently a leadership and management professor at the College of Business and Economics at California State University. And I'm from Long Beach, California, if my listeners do not know that. And he holds a PhD in organizational behavior and human resources from Indiana University. Ryan is also the author of Success Mindsets, the key to unlocking greater success in your life, work, and leadership, which is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. Welcome to the show, Ryan. I'm so excited to have you on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Michelle. This is great.
It's my pleasure. So I just said, we all need a mindset coach. We needed a mindset coach before 2020. But Now that we've been in 2020 and 2021, 1,000%, we all need a mindset coach. And especially with employees today. I'm an entrepreneur. I own multiple companies. My clients, I do M&A, I sell companies. And the number one complaint, the number one issue, one of the number one reasons that business owners want to sell their business is because of employees. They're like, Michelle, I can't take it anymore. My employees are driving me to drink. They're driving me to get old. And, we're selling a $55 million company right now. And they said, look, my employees are holding us hostage. They came to us in one department and said, we're taking 2 weeks vacation for the holiday. They said, hey, and we're going at the same time, even though policies say you get 1 week, you have to get it approved ahead of time, and you can't go at the same time in this department. So the owners of this business couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't do anything. And this is a large company with 350 employees. Wow. So how do we get our employees to do what we want them to do? How do we, it's really, I always say you spend more time at work than you do at home, right? So it's your second family. Yeah. But how do we really work on our own mindset as an entrepreneur? Because entrepreneurs are not the best leaders and the best managers, and work on the mindsets of employees. Can you help us with this problem?
I think I can, for sure. And one of the things that I find interesting is I think that leaders and these entrepreneurs or business owners, they can approach their organization in a couple of different ways. They can approach it more like a mechanic, right? Mm-hmm. As I'm in charge, I've got my shop and we need to get the cars in, we need to get the cars out. And I can make adjustments wherever I want and in order to speed this up. And that's one approach to leadership. And I think it's a really common approach to leadership. Another approach to leadership is leadership as a gardener. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that gardeners understand is they understand that they cannot force a plant or a tree to grow and to produce fruit. Mm. But what they recognize, and because of that, what they recognize is that they can create the right conditions for a plant or a tree to grow and produce fruit. That's the only way to bring about growth and fruit. And the better the conditions, the more the fruit and the higher the quality of the fruit. And so the best leaders see themselves as this gardener, that they are able to take care of the conditions in such a way that the employees grow, come to life, and produce the fruit that they want. And it's a different form of leadership than maybe a little bit more of the command and control. I'm going to incentivize you to grow. But the reality is it's really difficult to incentivize people to grow and produce fruit. We're much better off cultivating our garden. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And what I think is interesting about that, a couple of things. Number one, you're right about the control person, like the mechanic or the normal. I mean, most entrepreneurs are control freaks, and,
Yep.
we have the mindset we want it done right. We have to do it ourselves, or we think everybody else should be like us. And that's, what I find in most entrepreneurs, including myself sometimes. But what's interesting is the company that I'm talking about actually is a grower.
Interesting. Yeah.
So they do grow and they provide the best conditions to get the best crop, to get the best food out of the ground, but not necessarily the best conditions for their people, I guess. So I thought that was interesting that you use that analogy when that is the type of industry I'm referring to.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting because we need to think about this from the leadership perspective. Do the leaders have that right mindset, this gardener mentality? But then do the employees themselves, do they have effective mindsets? And maybe, so what I do when I work with people on mindsets is the first thing that we need to do is we need to help people awaken to their mindset. So as I'm looking at you, you're wearing glasses, right? And these glasses shape how you see your world. They shape how you interpret your world. Now, I'm not somebody who wears glasses, but my wife is somebody, if she's not wearing her glasses, she can't see the TV or the clock on the other side of the room, right? Mm-hmm. So our glasses shape how we see and perceive our world. Our mindsets play that very same role. They shape how we see and perceive our world. And based upon how we see and perceive, we're going to operate differently, such as how do we see failure? Do we see failure as something that says something about us? Or do we see a failure as an indication that we're pushing the boundaries? And this is going to be an opportunity for us to learn and grow. Mm-hmm. So everybody could see, or people can see the same thing, but then interpret it very differently. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to awaken to our mindsets, because we've all got them, but I'm not sure very many people have awakened to their mindsets. And I thought, maybe what I could do, if you don't mind, is just really quickly introduce a framework of mindsets that might be helpful to the listeners. Would you be up for that?
Absolutely. The one thing I was going to say is, when I partner with business owners, because we don't just sell businesses, we partner with business owners investing my money. So I want to make sure they have the right mindset, core competencies, et cetera. But I've always found out that you will never grow the business beyond what you can grow the owner.
Yeah. Love it. I couldn't agree more.
So let's discuss your frame.
Good. So I'm going to need your help, if that's okay, Michelle, is I'm going to give you 4 desires. And I want you to tell me whether or not society says these are good or bad desires. Is that all right?
Society or me?
Society.
Okay.
And then you can share what you think after you say what you think society thinks. So the desires are the desire to look good, the desire to be right, the desire to avoid problems, and the desire to get ahead. Mm-hmm. So look good, be right, avoid problems, and get ahead. What do you think society says?
I think society says to look good. I mean, if you look at all the fashion magazines and Facebook and, Instagram and everything else, I mean, that's what's hurting our teenagers today, is because there's a certain image out there that they feel like they have to, look like. What was the second one?
Be right.
Yeah, everybody wants to be right. I mean, look at our country. That's why we have so many problems in the world, is because everybody wants to be right. Yep. And number 3?
Avoid problems.
Yeah, I would say society is avoid problems.
Yeah.
That's not what I think, but that's what society thinks. Correct.
Yeah. And then the last one was get ahead.
Absolutely. 1,000%.
Right. So I think society says these are good desires. I mean, it's just these desires are justifiable because, to your point, who likes to look bad, be wrong, have problems, or get passed up? Mm-hmm. Right? Nobody does. But the thing that we need to ask ourselves with these desires is, when we have these desires, where is our focus? When we're focused on looking good, being right, avoiding problems,
it's on ourselves,
right? It's on ourselves. And these desires are fueled by what I call more negative mindsets. And if we're going to put labels on them, they're fixed, closed, prevention, and inward mindsets. Mm-hmm. So when we have these mindsets and their associative desires, it's justifiable. It makes sense, but it's self-protecting. And while we're socially incentivized to take on these desires, they're not effective desires to lead from or to operate from as employees. Right? There's actually better desires to have. So let me walk through these better desires. The better desires, instead of wanting to look good, we should want to learn and grow. Instead of wanting to be right, we should want to find truth. Instead of wanting to avoid problems, we should seek to reach goals. And instead of wanting to get ahead, we should have a desire to lift others. And so when people are focused on learning and growing, finding truth, reaching goals, and lifting others, they're not focused on themselves. They're not in the self-protection mode. They're in organization advance mode. They're all about contributing and elevating the organization or the people within it or the people that organization is serving.
And that's true for employers and employees, correct?
Both of them, correct. Yep. So it's just not easy to get there, right? And so I've got a mindset assessment that people can take at my website, ryangottfredson.com. I've had about 25,000 people take the assessment. And what I found is only 2% are in the top quartile for all 4 sets of these mindsets.
Wow.
So that means that most of us have some mindset work to do. And so those, and I forgot to put the labels on those positive mindsets. So the labels on the positive mindsets are growth, open, promotion, and outward. And so if we can awaken to where we are on each of these continuums, then we could get clarity about where we need to move the needle to be able to improve. So let me, if you don't mind, let me give you a quick example, because I just got off of a workshop with an organization, and it has about 300 employees, and they all took my mindset assessment. And what we found is that 67% of them, so 2/3 of them, have a fixed mindset. They're more focused on looking good than learning and growing, which also means, as we discuss this, is that they have a tendency to hold on to what has worked in the past, and they're not very willing to embrace what they need to do to be successful in the future. So they're finding themselves falling behind the times, if you will, because of a fixed mindset block.
Because looking good is just not how you look. It's about looking good in the eye of your employer. And a lot of times people are comfortable being comfortable, and they don't want to stretch and get comfortable being uncomfortable. So they don't want to take on new challenges. They don't want to do new things because they don't want to look bad in front of their boss. Is that true?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I think many people, in fact, there was a comment in this workshop where many people they feel like they're raised that I have to look good. I mean, I for example, my wife, she grew up with a mom who said, if it doesn't hurt, it's not pretty. Right. And that's kind of like a fixed mindset mentality, is you always have to look good. And if you do something and you fail, or it doesn't come naturally to you, well, then don't do that. Do other stuff. And that's just a fixed mindset mentality as opposed to a growth mindset mentality.
And that's why it takes so long to change these habits, is because it comes from the way we were raised. It comes from, and that's what I always say with my partners. I've got different partners that had very bad childhoods, and some were neglect, some were abuse, some were this and that. And that spills over, that carries over, because those affect that's where our learned behavior comes from. That's where these fixed beliefs come from, as our childhood. So sometimes you got to dig deep and try to, make new habits and get rid of the old ones, right?
Yeah. So you bring up
new beliefs,
an incredibly important point, and that there is a connection between trauma and mindsets. And one of the beautiful things about making that connection is what it suggests is that if we want to help people elevate in terms of their mindsets and their effectiveness, we've got to help them heal their minds. And to me, that's why I do what I do, is I want to help people to heal their minds so that they could get past their limiting self-beliefs or mental blocks and become the person that they want to become. And one of the things that's interesting about this is that And this, what I'm going to talk about, comes from the field of developmental psychology. Now, developmental psychology has been around since like the 1880s. And from the 1880s until the 1960s, almost 100% of the focus was on child development, because we can naturally see children develop before our eyes. They will develop as a function of age. And they largely assume that adults don't develop once they reach adulthood. Mm-hmm. But since the 1960s, researchers have been studying adult development. And what they found is really interesting. One is that adults can develop in adulthood, but then two, most adults do not. So what they found is that there's different levels of adult development. And the process of going up these levels is what I call vertical development. And when we vertically develop, what we're doing is we're enhancing our cognitive and emotional sophistication. And there's three primary levels of adult development and this vertical development. And what research has found is that 64% of all adults operate at that base level. They never develop beyond what they came into adulthood with. 35% operate in that second level, and only 1% operate at that top level. And so when we focus on mindsets, what we do is we actually help people vertically develop through these different mind levels to get to that top level of adult development.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I have, like I said, I've owned many different companies and partnered with different business owners. And, there's an owner I'm partnered with that was neglected, as a child. And, when I just was always neglected, basically. And everybody in their life kind of left them. And so they self-sabotage. They are very difficult to work for because they, everything is wrong, everything is wrong, everything is wrong. They never focus on what's right. They always focus on what's wrong because they're wanting to test that individual to see if that employee is going to stay or not, if they're going to be loyal to them or if they're going to leave and abandon them like everybody else did in their childhood. Does that make sense?
Yeah, trust issues for sure. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's very important, number one. And that's why I always say, gosh, I wish I had an assessment before I partnered with some of these owners because then I might not partner with them.
Yeah.
All right.
So so this mindset assessment, like I said, is just designed to help us to see to what degree are we more self-protective? And I think this person you're talking about sounds like very self-protective versus organization advancing or contributing to the greater good or the greater world within our sphere of influence.
Well, you have a leadership assessment, so I need to start using that on my leaders before I bring them in.
Yeah, for sure.
On my partners, on my potential partners. So how do you go about changing this baggage? Because look, let's face it, everybody's got baggage, right? Even if you had the perfect childhood, which I don't think really exists, there's still some baggage there because then you might be a spoiled brat and be the only child and not be able to work well with others, right? So how do you go about changing this? And how long does it take?
Really good question. So it's not easy, but it's easier than most people think.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why I love it. And everything that I'm going to say comes from this field of developmental psychology that speaks to this notion of vertically developing ourselves. And I don't think it's too different than learning how to count to 10 in a different language. Do you speak any other languages?
I mean, I speak Spanish, but I only know the bad words. So I do know how to count to 10 in Spanish.
Yeah, right. So if we want to learn how to count to 10 in a different language, whether it's Spanish or German, whatever it happens to be, the first step is we've got to have the motivation to do so and believe that it's possible, right? If I'm never going to go to Germany, there may be no point in me ever learning German. But if I'm going to go there, then maybe I want to learn how to count to 10 in German. And then if I believe that I can do it, then we can move on to the next step.
Gotcha.
The next step is we've got to put words associated with the numbers, right? If I want to learn how to count to 10 in Spanish, I need to know that uno means one, dos means two, tres means three, etc. And The same thing goes with our mindsets. We got to put labels to our mindsets, because if we don't have labels and we don't understand what they are, we can never introspect about them. Okay. So we've got to start to learn the language of mindsets, and that will allow us to deepen our self-awareness. And then the third step is we just need to practice, right? If I want to learn how to count to 10 in Spanish or German or whatever, I need to spend 5 or 10 minutes a day. And in the course of 3 to 4 weeks, I'm going to become quite proficient in counting to 10 in that language. And what the science behind mindset says is the same thing happens. If we could spend 5 to 15 minutes per day over the course of 3 to 4 weeks, we will make significant shifts in our mindsets.
And how do you know what to spend that time on? Like, does that come out of your assessment, and then you tell your client what's because I always say one thing, right? Focus on one thing. So many people try to fix so many things at once. And there's a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller that I say, pick that one thing. So do you advise them on what they should work from the assessment? How does that work?
Yeah, I do. So I usually say, if you take the assessment, find the one that either is the most meaningful to you or where you scored the lowest, and start there. Focus on that as your one thing. And then the mindset assessment includes resources to be able to work on them. So let me give you an example.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of this book, The 5-Minute Journal?
Yes.
Okay. So this journal was given to me about 4 years ago by a business owner. And the first time I met him, he's a really charismatic leader, and he hands me this journal. He says, "This book is going to change your life." And I look at it, and outwardly, I'm very gracious. I'm saying, "Oh, thank you so much. I love books. This is fantastic." But inwardly, I'm thinking, there is no way in hell that I am journaling. Like, that is just, I don't know who you think who I am. That is not me. I am not a journaler. And so I brought it home, and I set it on my desk, and then I literally picked it up to throw it in the trash can. And then I said to myself, well, he said it might change my life. Let me give it a try. And so I told myself, I'm going to give this 2 weeks. If I feel a difference, I'll keep doing it. If I don't feel a difference, I'll toss it in the trash. No harm, no foul. So what it does is it invites me every morning to write down 3 things I'm grateful for, 3 things that would make today great, and a self-affirmation. And then at the end of every day, what are 3 amazing things that happened today, and how could I have made today even better? And honestly, this book, and so this is exactly a mindset tool, because it's something we engage in for about 5 to 15 minutes on a daily basis. And how it helped me was it helped me shift from a prevention mindset to a promotion mindset. So I used to have this prevention mindset. I just didn't want problems to occur. I wanted to stay comfortable. I didn't want to get out of my comfort zone. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur or start my own business. But as I started to answer these questions, such as what are 3 things that would make today great, and what are 3 amazing things that happened today, I started to think differently. How do I make today better than yesterday? How do I make this week better than last week? How do I make this year better than last year? And so I credit this book to me starting my own business and writing my book, and ultimately getting on the Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller list. I mean, had I never done this, it never would have happened.
That's amazing. I think, people talk about it, very successful leaders talk about journaling all the time. Yeah. So I think Tony Robbins talks about that. Tony Robbins talks about the affirmations, journaling at the end of every day, basically based upon what you just said. So I agree. I do think that works. But is that going to really change someone's baggage and then making decisions and self-sabotaging based upon their childhood? Like, I have another owner that has a 3rd grade education. This owner doesn't want to hire anybody smarter than him because he doesn't want to be intimidated by such. I can give you those examples all day long. Yeah.
No, you're spot on. So what I found working with leaders is about 50% of leaders, they kind of just need a tool or a nudge, and they could run with it, and they can see a pretty significant shift in their lives. So for me, with the prevention to promotion, I needed this, right? And this book helped. But one of my other mindsets has been more sticky. And the mindset that's been more sticky for me is the inward to the outward mindset. And what I've learned as I've been on my own introspective and trauma healing journey is that I do have some past trauma that makes it difficult for me to trust others. There was a little bit of neglect in my childhood. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's been the mindset set that's been really difficult for me to shift.
So have you self-sabotaged before by testing people?
I'm not much of a tester. I'm more of a avoider. So I avoid other people because I don't trust them to be able to fulfill whatever I need them to do.
Right.
So the testers are more anxious and I'm more avoidance, if that makes sense.
And I think, I wanted to kind of back up for a minute because I should have started with this when we started this podcast for my listeners. The podcast is all about exit rich. And you might be asking yourself, what does this have to do with me exiting rich, Michelle? Well, you got to go back to my book where we talk about the 6 Ps. And the very first P in the 6 Ps is people. Why is people first? Because if you don't have people and you don't have good people, you don't have a business. You have a glorified job that you go to work at every day versus a business that actually works for you. 80% of businesses on the market will never sell, according to Steve Forbes, who endorsed Exit Rich. And the number one reason for that is because business owners have built themselves a glorified job, not a business. You don't build a business, you build people, and people build the business. The number one reason why businesses are not sellable is because business owners are working in their business with their hand in every pot versus working on their business. You have to hire the right people and put them in the right seat. You have to ask a who question: who handles customer service, who handles legal, quality control, billing. The list goes on and on. The clue is you should never be next to who. So a lot of business owners don't hire the right people because they haven't been trained on how to hire the right people. And more importantly than that, if they do hire the right people, they don't always keep them because they haven't been trained on the coaching aspect of it. They haven't been trained on the mindset aspect of that. So that's why I brought Ryan in today, is to talk about leadership, to talk about mindset, because without building the proper teams, you will never build a sustainable business that you can scale. You will never have that better quality of life, and you'll never have a sellable asset. And I wanted to start with that in the beginning, and I forgot because I got so excited to have Ryan here.
No, it's good. And maybe let me try maybe as best I can to validate what you're saying here. So I actually had the fortunate opportunity over the last week to have a couple of phone conversations with Alan Mulally, the former CEO at Boeing at Ford.
Yep.
And one of the things that is we're talking about leaders and how to help leaders develop. He said something that was very interesting. He said most leaders, from his experience, see leadership as a reward. That this is, it's kind of like I earned this. I got up on this pedestal and now I could reap the benefits of being in this position. And he said those types of leaders never make great leaders. The best leaders are the leaders who don't see leadership as a reward. They see it as a responsibility for stewardship. And because exactly what you're saying is a person who sees leadership as a reward is probably not going to value people. Somebody who sees leadership as a responsibility of stewardship, they will value people.
And when you were saying that, a leader that came to my mind, and you might disagree, but Sam Walton, he's one of the greatest leaders of all times, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, because he was part of the people. He wasn't like up on his pedestal telling everybody what to do. He was in with the people as one of the people. So I think, leadership is so tough for most entrepreneurs because it's not something that we're taught in school. We're not taught in college. And a lot of times your baggage is really the way that you lead or the way that you coach or manage. And so a lot of times I tell entrepreneurs, you just need to get out of your own way. And if you're not going to, if you're not a good leader or don't have the desire to become a great leader, because everybody can become a great leader if they have the desire, then you need to hire one.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
For sure. So as you're saying this, one of the other things that's coming to mind is Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. In his book, he talks about a level 5 leader that are essential for organizations having transformational growth. And he says that these level 5 leaders are people who have deep humility and intense will. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that, as you're saying this, is I think that's a description of what you're talking about. Is at the end of the day, we need leaders who have deep humility and intense will. But one's capacity, at least in the moment, to be humble and to have this strong purpose-driven will is contingent upon the degree to which they've healed from their past trauma. Right? Mm-hmm. The people who aren't very humble are usually trying to make up for that because of something that's happened in their past. Yeah. And they haven't yet healed from it. And so when we talk about helping people to become these level 5 leaders, hopefully that helps us see is we really need to go through our own healing journey in order to get there.
And that's part of your process, right? You help people heal, because unless you can heal and really move on, it's going to keep creeping up. I think it's something that people have to work on every day. It's not something you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm over my past. Yeah. Like you said, you have to journal about it. All right. So right now in today's economy, given this pandemic, given the new administration, given lots of different things, it's very difficult to manage employees. It's very difficult to get employees I told you about the example where all these employees walked out at the same time to take their 2-week vacation because they're really holding the owners hostage. Mm-hmm. When you put an ad out and you try to advertise and, go to LinkedIn and try to really build your team and get the right people, it's very difficult these days to get, because people are jumping ship and leaving, going from one company to another for $1 raise an hour.
Yeah.
And how do you really find the right people, train them up, coach them to get them to stay and not always be about the money? What are your recommendations for that? Am I making sense? Especially because I think it's worse now than it's ever been before. Yeah. And a lot of companies are struggling. I mean, you got Target paying $15 an hour. I know they want to raise the minimum wage to that, but you got plants and different types of companies that can't afford that. Warehouse workers and manufacturing and things like that, they can't afford that. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 ways to think about it. The first way is one that we've already talked about. Are we creating an environment that other people and employees want to be a part of?
And let's dig a little bit deeper there, because I know my listeners are probably thinking, what do you mean by create an environment? Like, I get them pizza every Friday. I do this for them. I do that for them. I do this for them. I think we got to dig a little bit deeper there so my listeners understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. So part of this is bringing that gardener mentality into it, right? Mm-hmm. Is we're creating these conditions. Okay, well, what do we need to think about when we create these conditions? Well, there's a gentleman, his name is Benjamin Zander. He's the founder and conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. And he's got a great story. He said during the first half of his career, he was the stereotypical conductor. He saw his musicians as instruments, there to play the music the way that he wanted it played. Because if he could get them to play the music the way that he wanted it played, then he would get all of this notoriety. Mm. But then he says halfway through his career,
you go back to me looking good.
Yep. He has this epiphany, and the epiphany is, while I may be the face of this orchestra, I don't play a note. Mm. And he said this changed everything for him. It was totally life-changing. He says he went from seeing his musicians not as instruments, but as people. And he saw his job not as getting them to play the music the way that he wanted them to play it. His job was to get them to play the music the way that they were most capable of playing it. And when he says, who's going to produce more valuable music? People who play the way that I make them play it, or people who play in the way that they are best suited to playing it? And it's those that where he brings out the best and the strengths of those musicians is going to produce the most valuable music. And so as he talks about this, he has a question that I think is incredibly powerful. And the question is, when things aren't going well, who am I being that their eyes are not shining? So he says, all the time, I am looking for shining eyes. And if I don't see shining eyes, I'm asking, who am I being that their eyes are not shining? Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's the first place that leaders need to start is this, okay, who am I being that their eyes are not shining? Mm-hmm. I've got a suggestion in terms of another framework to focus on, but I wanted to just see if you had any thoughts on that.
No, I actually love that because, again, it goes back to what you said before. Looking good, if the leader is just all worried about looking good themselves, then they're not focused on the strengths of their people.
Yeah. Yep.
It's basically what you're saying that he said. Because he wanted them to play the way he wanted them to play. So he looked good and he got all these awards. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a helpful tool for leaders, if they're not familiar with, is the Gallup organization focuses on employee engagement. And they've got an engagement measure that's called the Q12. And it's 12 different questions that they have employees asked to determine the degree to which employees are engaged. Mm-hmm. And I think it's maybe one of the best frameworks that I've found to think through a small amount, but also a variety of things that leaders should have on their radar. So these are things like, do the employees have the material and equipment that they need? Are they given opportunities to operate according to their strengths? Are they given recognition on a weekly basis? Does somebody at work care about them as a person? Do their opinions count at work? Are they given opportunities for development? So there's 12 of these different questions. I'm actually a former Gallup employee. And one of the things that I found fascinating is they've got these 12 questions, but I've always wondered, they're all important, but is there one or two that is most important? And so much data as I could, which was over 70,000 responses, I did some analyses and I found that there's two of these items that are more important than the others. And it was really eye-opening for me. So the most important one was, do my opinions at work count? Mm-hmm. And what we found is that if an employee can give a 5 on a 5-point scale, so strongly agree that their opinions count at work, then 95% of those employees are engaged. And this is in Gallup's database, who only has 35% of employees engaged. So if they can give a 5 to my opinions count at work, they're going to be engaged. The second one was, does somebody at work care about me as a person? And what we found is that if they give a 1 through 4, meaning that they cannot strongly agree to this, that they can't strongly agree that somebody at work cares about them as a person, only 12% of those employees are engaged.
Really?
So what this means is employees need to feel like their opinions count and that they're cared about as a person. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that those are intertwined, because if we feel like our voice matters, that means we're going to feel like we're cared about as a person. So if I was to prioritize it, it would be those two things.
And that's more important to them than money, right?
Yeah.
So the companies that are saying, hey, people are, jumping because they're going into another company for $1 more, $2 more, or saying, look, if you want to keep me, instead of paying me $1,200 a week, you got to pay me $1,600 a week. I mean, these are stories I hear every day from my owners. What is that about? What is that about? Because they think it's just about the money, and they think it's because of the economy, and I think it's because, what do you think is the underlying problem here? That they're not being heard, their opinions don't count, and they're not feeling like they're cared about as an employee?
Yeah. So people don't leave their jobs, they leave their managers.
No, I get that. I mean, I got an example of a gentleman that's been at this company for probably 15 years, and he just went and told one of the bosses that you raised me to $1,600 or I'm out. And they said, look, we treat him like a family. We take him on trips. We do all these things with him. We go to him for his opinion. They say that they've connected on those 2 levels, because I knew about that already. Mm-hmm. So I asked them those questions, and they said they've already connected with him on those 2 levels. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's tough to know the circumstances just on that surface level, but I think it's
Well, they're about to replace
You've
him.
got to
That's
ask those questions. And so it's good that you're asking those questions. Does this employee have a voice? Do they feel valued by the organization? Because I imagine that an employee would not leave the organization if they didn't feel valued by that organization. And so it then becomes, why aren't you feeling valued? And for some people, that could be a voice thing. For other people, it might be a pay thing. For other people, it might be a recognition thing.
So it is about pay too. I mean, a lot of employees do leave to make more money.
Yeah.
But, I just interviewed a nanny the other day. She was leaving her family that she loves and adores just to make $1 or $2 more an hour. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to hire you because then you'll be leaving me too for $1 or $2 more an hour.
Yeah.
So it is money too, but money is usually not in the top two.
Yeah.
Okay. But I just want to say, if they're not feeling valued, if this employee is not feeling valued, then maybe in their mind, the only way they can feel valued is to get more per week or more per hour.
Yeah.
Like this employee I'm talking about that wants 1,600 instead of 1,200.
And they probably don't have the best mindset to begin with. I mean, as you talk about this nanny that you interviewed, well, it seems like she's more focused on what she makes than on adding value to your children.
Yeah. So that's why she's not getting hired.
Yeah. Right. So it may, I mean, these are people that maybe we're okay with them going because they don't have the best mindset to begin with, that they're more concerned about themselves and their own self-protection than they are advancing the purpose of the organization or serving their customers.
Right. 1,000%. So, you talk a lot about vertical development. What is vertical development and how does it differ from typical development efforts?
Yeah. So everything that we've talked about, I don't know if you get this sense, but at least I feel like I feel it, but we've been talking about development in a deep, really inner introspective way. And that's what vertical development is all about. It's all about elevating our ability to make meaning of our world and with more cognitive and emotional sophistication. Mm-hmm. So this is a unique form of development because most developmental efforts are horizontal development. Mm-hmm. Horizontal development is adding knowledge and skills. Mm-hmm. And let me give you an analogy that I think will make these come to life. So I think that horizontal development is like downloading an app onto an iPad. It's good, right? Because it allows the iPad to do more than what it could do previously. It can now do something that it couldn't do before. And this is beneficial, but it is a form of development that is limited. Because when you add an app onto an iPad, the iPad doesn't necessarily operate any more effectively. It doesn't operate more quickly. It can't do any more complex tasks. So vertical development is all about upgrading that iPad's internal operating system. Or if we think about us, vertical development is about upgrading our internal operating system. And the way and so this is different than what most people are used to, which is the horizontal, but horizontal is only ever going to be incrementally helpful. It will never be transformationally helpful. That's what vertical development can do. And as we've talked about, it's deep. It's getting at root traumas and healing from them. It's awakening to our mindsets and shifting from going from self-protection mode to contribution mode. And that might involve somebody learning to trust others, right? That might be part of their journey so that they could overcome some of these mental blocks and barriers within their internal operating system. So my opinion is that vertical development is underutilized and underknown, but it may be the most important thing for us to understand if we want to be the leader or the person or the employee that we want to be.
Yeah. So this is great information because it's not just for the entrepreneur who's trying to lead their team, to get them to build a company. It's for, leaders of all departments, plus it's also for the employees and really it's for anybody.
Yeah.
Because everybody is going to be a leader at some form. I mean, you lead your kids, you lead your spouse, you lead, right? Yeah. So.
And we've all got our own shit that we need to work through, right?
All got our own shit. Any other great examples like you've given or great resources that people can go to if they really want to become a better leader. And I do encourage all of my listeners that own companies, you know, if you're not going to take the time to become a better leader, make sure you get someone in your team that can lead your people, because you will never be able to really free yourself from your business without great leadership. And that's why we have Ryan on today.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a few resources. So if you're a leader and if you want to learn from some really vertically developed leaders and how they take this Gardner mentality, there's two books that stand out in my mind. One of them is Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. He's the founder of Pixar Animation and also led Disney Animation when Disney bought out Pixar. The second one is Hit Refresh by Satya Nadella, who's the current CEO of Microsoft, who in the last, I guess it's 8 years now, he's increased Microsoft's stock price over 10 times. And it's all been through a focus on mindsets. So those are some really great case studies. And they're also case studies that I use in my book, Success Mindsets. And so if somebody's maybe not a leader or an aspiring leader, I would say my book is maybe approachable for anybody to dive into and awaken to their mindsets. And
what's the name of your book again?
So it's Success Mindsets, Your Keys to Unlocking Greater Success in Your Life, Work, and Leadership.
And that comes with the quiz, or they can go online?
Yeah, it has the mindset assessment in it. But even if you wanted to take a mindset assessment without the book, you could just go to my website at ryangottfredson.com.
Wonderful. So what's an example of some bad leaders? Like, you just named some good ones. Who's some bad ones? I could probably name a few. Well, the presidents of the United States. I said presidents.
Yeah. The political, and this is where the political system very much socially incentivizes people to look good, be right, avoid problems, and get ahead. Yeah. Right. And so it's a really hard area to be an effective leader, because we're incentivized to take on the self-protective mindsets. I mean, there's clearly some really terrible leaders, but one of the leaders that I think is really interesting to talk about. Yeah, right. So there's some really obvious ones, but one that's interesting to talk about is a little bit controversial is Jack Welch. So Jack Welch is somebody who grew this GE empire, but ever since he's left, GE has crumbled, right? And he's implemented tactics like a stacked rank performance management system that seemed to pay some short-term benefits, but had some long-term negative repercussions. And in fact, and I think evidence of him not being an effective leader is even the title of one of his best-selling books, which is Winning. Right? I don't think a really vertically developed leader would ever write a book called Winning. Right? You get people like Satya Nadella's Hit Refresh. Ed Catmull, he writes Creativity Inc. Mm-hmm. This isn't about them. It's about, for them, the book is about creating.
No, winning is something winning. You would hear from Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jack Welch, it's interesting you brought him up. I actually spoke on stage with him. I had the opportunity to speak on not with him on the same stage, and I had the opportunity to meet him. Yeah.
Oh, great.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I
won't tell him you said that.
No. And I wouldn't say that Jack Welch is a bad person. Yeah. I'm just saying that the level of cognitive and emotional sophistication that he led with was limiting him in his leadership. That doesn't make him a terrible person. I would just say that he was limited as a leader. And there's probably things that he would even say he would go back and do differently given the opportunity.
So go back and name those 4 things that we should be focused on instead of how we look. We should be focused on
learning and growing.
Number 1.
Instead of being right, we want to find truth and think optimally.
Find truth.
Instead of avoiding problems, reach goals. Instead of getting ahead, lift others.
So I think that's amazing. And that's why I wanted you to repeat it at the end. Any words of wisdom you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, maybe let me just reiterate what we've talked about a few times already, which is if we want to do this vertical development work, it really is all about healing ourselves. And maybe let me give a couple of other resources. I'm currently writing a book that'll come out later in 2022.
What's the name of that book? Because I was about to ask.
So it's called The Elevated Leader.
Okay.
Leveling up your leadership through vertical development. So that'll come out later this year. But if you wanted to dive into this notion of trauma, there's two books that I would really highly recommend. One book is called What Happened to You. It's by Bruce Johnson and Oprah Winfrey. It just recently came out. I think it's the most approachable book on trauma that I've come across, and it's really powerful. The second book is called The Body Keeps the Score, and that's by Bessel van der Kolk. And it is the deepest and most comprehensive book on trauma that I've read, but it's also really approachable. So one of the things that I love about his book is he walks through different trauma healing approaches and the science behind them. And I found that incredibly beneficial for myself. So after reading that book, I've actually found myself a therapist, and I'm doing a form of therapy that's called EMDR. It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And I found it an incredibly awakening and healing experience for myself. I think I'm a completely different person now than I was a year ago. And so it's been pretty powerful, and would recommend people looking into it if they want to work on healing their minds.
Wonderful. Any other resources? Any other last minute thoughts?
I think that's probably pretty good for now. We probably gave them almost too much, but that's all right.
The one thing.
Yeah, right.
All right. So remind everyone again about your book and where they can get it.
Yeah, Success Mindsets. Go to my website, ryangottfredson.com. And then connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active on social media. Would love to connect with other people further.
Wonderful. So Ryan, and make sure everyone goes and takes that quiz on your website.
Yep.
I know you sent it to me and I haven't taken it. I've been too busy, but I will take it. Entrepreneurs, do not make that as an excuse like I did.
Well, and it's only 20 questions. It takes just about 5 minutes, and it's a pretty comprehensive report that you get. So I think
wonderful.
Like it.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, and you work with individuals, you work with groups, you work with companies.
Leadership teams, companies as a whole, individuals, all of the above. And so oftentimes when I work with these groups, it involves the mindset assessment. When I'm working with a leadership team or an organization as a whole, I put together a collective report for that group so that they can see not only where they are, but also where the group is as a whole. And that allows for some really transformational discussion. So it's a pretty powerful experience for these
Wonderful.
groups. Yeah.
Well, Ryan, you over-delivered. I appreciate all the golden nuggets, all the resources for our listeners. And of course, I appreciate all of my listeners. So again, make sure you tune into Exit Rich. Make sure you share. Make sure you like. Make sure you go read my book, Exit Rich, because it is, as Steve Forbes says, the best book to read. So you're not leaving money on the table, and you can build that sellable asset. And so Sharon Lechter is my co-author, who also wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki. So make sure you get Exit Rich. And again, listen to Exit Rich, share it with all of your family and friends. And can't wait to have another episode. Thank you again, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michelle. This has been great. You've been a great host.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Exit Rich podcast. Don't forget to check out Michelle Seiler Tucker's Build to Sell Blueprint books and Exit Rich, along with more blogs, videos, and resources at exitrichpodcast.com. Be sure to connect with Michelle on Facebook or LinkedIn, and stay tuned for her next episode by subscribing in your favorite podcast player.